So once the producers, composers, and the writers and singers find themselves together and they have a great song that they did in their home or wherever they were inspired, they now need to fixate. So back in the days, it used to be on a music studio. So you need to fixate your recordings on a tape. But nowadays, everything is digital, so you fixate it on a digital medium, but it's more or less this, it's not the same thing, but you just record, right? So you need usually a studio to record your music. And back in the days, you had no choice. You had to be in the studio because not a lot of people had studios in their home. Nowadays, everybody has a studio in their house, and that would be a show that I will do about the death of the studio. But back in the days, a studio session would cost €1,000 for, I think, 6 hours, depending on the studio. And then if you really wanted to record like for 24 hours, you would have to pay 5,000 to 6,000 euros for 24 hours. It would be called a lockdown or a lockout. So maybe you take like the studio for 1 week and 24/7 you have engineers that are here. You stay in the studio, you sleep in the studio, you bring chicks in the studio, like when you eat in the studio. It was crazy. And it cost so much money that you would need investors. So, what about the studio? Before we talk about the price of the studio and the investor, right? What is a music studio? A music studio is a place where you can have instruments, so you can maybe you have just the idea of what you wanna sing. You don't have a good microphone like mine to record, and you might just have and you might not have good synthesizers and instruments to really make your sound professional with somebody who's recording it in a professional way and they know what they're doing, an engineer, which is another part of the food chain. What you would do is you would need a studio that has all this. So back in Paris, we had big studios with like everything: guitars, drums, synthesizers, all the new synthesizers, and then big tables when you mix and record, etc. And these places would cost a lot of money. So you would need an investor, right? So the studio is the place where you can create and finish your tracks and make them sound professional back in the days and mix them. So you need an engineer, which is somebody who does that, record you, and sometimes the recording engineer is also the mix engineer. But most of the time, the person who records and the person who mixes are two different people. Back when we used to record Sumia's album, for example, we had somebody, Tony Rosa, who would come and record every song. So Eligio's album, Sumia's album, ABG, he would record a track, and then you had another guy, Bruno Quinquet, who would come and he would mix every song. And then after that, I replaced both of them by me, because I learned to record by myself and I learned to mix. So I was like, bye guys, save money, sushi raw. So because studio would cost so much money back in the days, before the technology helped us have recording studios, you then had to have enough money to be able to pay your studio, pay the recording, pay the mastering, pay all that stuff. And what we had was record labels. They were the only ones that had enough money to. So you had independent record labels like Sushi Raw, and then you had medium record label, and then you had the major labels, the big ones. So Universal, Sony, BMG, Chrysalis, Epic, etc., etc. And Warner, all these would have enough money, and sometimes they even had their own studios, and they would say, okay, to record your album of I would say to record your album of 15 songs, you're gonna have to do 1 month in the studio. If 1 month in the studio is let's say we block the studio for 5,000 a day, or let's say they do a deal with you because we take a whole month. So we do 3,000 euros multiplied by 31 days. So that's 100K, more or less, 93,000 plus paying the engineer, paying this, paying that, your taxi. Let's say I'm going to spend 100,000 euros to be able to pay for your studio and invest in you. That's the record label would do that. They would sign a contract with you when you belong to them for maybe the next 5 to 7 years, and your music that you will record, because they will pay for it, it belongs to them too. And maybe you owe them 3 albums, so that maybe they invest in you, they invest in your promotion, they invest in making you become whoever you're going to become, but you have to give them at least 3 albums because they're not investing for you so that you can go to the next label when you're famous. So they want to do at least 3 albums, and they have the option for the next 3 albums or the next contract. They have the right to, if you don't have a better proposal, they have the right to try to give you a better proposal when it's the end of your contract. So usually these type of deals, they used to be 5 years or 7 years plus an option, and usually 3 albums. So they engage that they will invest enough money so that you could do 3 albums, and you cannot, after you do your first album and you become famous, or if you become famous, you cannot go to another record label. You're stuck there for 3 albums. So that was the deals that would do. In exchange, they would invest, and because they are the ones who invest, they're also the one who make most of the money, because they are recuperating the money they invest. So most of the time when they spend like 100K, they don't tell you, hey, we're just spending 100K. Most of the time they're going to give you an advance. I mean, it depends. Sometimes what they invest in the studio is the advance. Sometimes they say, don't worry, we're investing the money and we'll give you, let's say, 50,000 euros. I got less than that. I got, at the time it was worth a lot of money because it was in francs, but I got the equivalent today of 15,000 euros. But back when it was francs, it was worth way more money. It was probably worth around 50,000 euros, but it was 15,000 euros. And that money was an advance, meaning that every time they will make 100 euros, and they're supposed to give you 10%, right? This is your share from the sales. These 10%, before they give it to you, they have to get the amount of money that they give you as an advance first. So let's say you take an advance of 10,000 euros. Before you make any money, they have to make 100,000 euros. Because when they make 100,000 euros, they're supposed to give you 10%. But if you took an advance of 10,000, then when they make 100,000, they will tell you, Okay, we were supposed to give you 10,000, but because we gave you an advance, the 10,000 here are paying back your advance. And now, if you want to start making money, you have to make 100,000 euros and €1, so you can get your first 10 cents. So let's say you had an advance of 10,000 euros. If you want to make 10,000 euros from your album, you need to sell the equivalent of 200,000 actually, because you have to repay your advance and then you make money. So it's like a bank in reality. A label is like a big bank with people that back in the days their job was to scoot the A&R. They would have to look for who's the hot artist. So they would send people to shows, and these people would come and they would see you. They would come to your show, and then they would be like, yo, listen, do you want to sign? Like, listen, we would love to invest in you, etc., etc. That's how people found me actually. And or you could send your demos to, so we record a demo in a small studio, invest in that, record it in a cassette, and then send the cassette to all the record labels, and maybe an A&R would listen to it and be like, this is nice, hey, come to my office this day. So I used to go to the offices all the time. And then actually I got found in South America finally when I was working for Tanya Saval. That's how the CEO of her label came to listen to what I did for her album Secret, where I work on 7 or 8 tracks. And then that's when he heard some of my song and he was like, yo, I want to sign you. And that's how I got and that's how the adventure started with Dominique Rousseau and Globe Music. That was part of Sony. So now you have the people who need to finance. So that's a part of the ecosystem. Let me